Welcome back for part two of tonight's debate devoted to the question of immigration. It was at the heart of a major speech by François Hollande tonight as he inaugurated, 7 years after it opened, France's Museum of the History of Immigration. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
There are always the same preconceptions, the same suspicions. But what's new is the penetration of these ideas, the doubt that now surrounds our ability to live with each other. Will France still be France? Will it be able to assimilate, to integrate, to absorb, to take the best while avoiding the worst? These are the questions that trouble many of our countrymen.
Well, to talk about that, I'm joined here in the studio by Bruno Bernard, who works for the UMP party, deputy of the mayor of Paris's 9th arrondissement. Also with me, Nassir Haghini, sociologist and professor here in Paris. Equally on the set is Amadou Diop, who is a PhD in political science and specialist of these particular questions, and also joining us late, but we're delighted to see you better late than ever, Laura Slimani, who is president of the Young Socialists. We were speaking a moment ago about precisely the point that François Hollande discussed. Anti-immigration has always, policies, ideas, sentiment has always been there, but it is its resurgence and its penetration into the everyday discourse, into everyday political life in France that has changed and that has gotten so much more intense.
Actually, I think that the leaders are showing a politics which is not the real politics. The leaders are the political leaders are actually hiding something. People who are working here as migrants, the migrants who are present in France, actually, they contribute in an economical sphere, which is actually very important to underline. 12 million euro are reported by OCDE, bringing by illegal immigrants in France. And I think that no one is taking that in account nowadays.
Why did it take the French president, Laura Slimani, 2.5 years to make a major speech on this particular issue?
Maybe earlier in the years he hasn't had the enough courage to do it, but I think it's still good that he did it now, because, and I mean, I followed the speech in the taxi on the way here because it took me an hour and a half. But from what I saw from it, it was a great federating speech, and it's important after 10 years of the right wing being in power. 5 years of Nicolas Sarkozy dividing the French according to their origins and where they supposedly came from. It was important that the left-wing president had a federating speech around immigration, because it is part of our history, and as it was underlined, it actually brings more than it takes away. I would say it doesn't take away anything from France, but it brings a lot to France. It has brought a lot to France over the years, and it's important that we recognize it, because for all the French people who come from this history, and it is my case, but it is the case of a quarter of the French, it is important to know that we are part of France, and that France and the Republic gives us enough space and respect.
One of the problems, Nassir Haghini, is that it is a voice, the one we heard tonight, that is drowned out by everything else that's happening in Europe, whether you're listening to David Cameron, whether you're looking at the numbers of the far-right parties that have made it into the European Parliament, and seeing that discourse slip throughout Europe. It is simply not a voice that we're hearing.
No, actually, you just wonder whether he's trying to save something of what used to be Europe, or might have become Europe, which is an open continent, open to otherness, open to new faces and new ways of life. You just wonder whether Hollande is doing this right now, whether he's trying to distance himself from all kind of xenophobic, Islamophobic, and on the whole racist discourses that have become mainstream. So is he trying to push forward some sort of a new discourse that might become mainstream, although we have a hard time believing that this could be working so far?
One of the things he mentioned tonight, Bruno Bernard, is the major new drive on the part of the French government to make the problem of racism and anti-Semitism a sort of national cause, something that people will rally around. We've seen cases of racism, cases of anti-Semitism that have caught the headlines a great deal in France recently. Is that something that the French right, the UMP, agrees with? That it is time that these issues are grasped and dealt with?
Well, I believe that these issues have been grasped and dealt with, or different governments have tried to deal with these issues for the past 40 years and have not succeeded. I mean, François Mitterrand created SOS Racisme in the 80s, and Jacques Chirac, actually created that museum as a recognition to what immigration brought to France. And still, Marine Le Pen and lots of anti-immigration parties in Europe are doing very well in the election, so there must be something wrong. And apparently what we're saying around this table is that everything is great and that nothing is to worry because of immigration. Well, apparently lots of European people do disagree with that.
Laura Simoni, I'd like to put that to you. The voters are suggesting something else. They believe that there is a problem with immigration and that it is not necessarily a good thing, or they would not be voting in these anti-immigration parties to the European Parliament, to their national parliaments either.
First of all, I think there are many, many reasons why people vote for the far right now, and today, and immigration is probably part of it, but it is not the whole of it. The reason is, the question is, why do some people need to find scapegoats today? Why are immigrants chosen as scapegoats? Of course, there's the economic situation, but it's not everything, because also in countries where you have growth, jobs, it doesn't really happen. But you have, with globalization, a speech that has a resonance on people's minds when, people using fears of disappearing in globalization and pointing at immigrants. But we know that economically, immigrants bring money into the countries. Demographically, they bring dynamics in countries that need it actually in order to sustain their social model. And culturally, they do bring a lot as well. If you look at the artists, sportsmen, and everyone who actually, represents Europe and European countries in the world. So really, the question is: do politicians ask the right questions? And when you ask questions that actually stigmatize some people, well, it actually gets into people's minds. So politicians have a huge responsibility. And I will say that Nicolas Sarkozy and his ministers have had a huge responsibility in the rise of racism and in the fact that it is acceptable in France to be racist or to point at people for their skin color.
Yeah. Is that fair?
The Socialist Party never played with fire with the National Front. That's a given. Mitterrand never.
It's not what I said, and I can recognize that
from Marine Le Pen and Jean-Marie Le Pen's speeches. To say that Nicolas Sarkozy is responsible for the rise of racism in France, I think, is a bit of an overstatement, to be fair.
So he had responsibility.
Well, then we all had a responsibility, and I think that François Hollande and the Socialist Party do have a lot of responsibility in what the National Front is achieving at the moment.
Well, maybe that would be interesting to speak outside the parties, because a lot of French do not recognize themselves in the way the parties are dealing with these kind of questions. And when you look at the French reality, actually it has become totally multicultural and multiracial. Interactions are not filled with tensions among the French. So the question would be, is this an economic question, or is it rather this intention to become pervasive about immigration as a problem, because we cannot solve the problems that you are really facing. So immigration is kind of a decoy that works perfectly in the French and the European context, because all governments are totally powerless when it comes to real changes that could cope with the problems that financial capitalism and other great mutations we are facing are doing. This is the damage.
Is there not, Amadou Diop, a real problem that perhaps has exacerbated people's frustrations with the idea of immigration and allowed the right to do well Europe-wide, which is that the EU as a union has failed spectacularly to deal with the question of immigration within its own borders?
Actually, I don't think that European country failed, because we can see in a lot of European countries that immigration is well accepted. In some country, we can notice that only in France and in Berlin, only in France that there is a problem. Really? Yeah.
No,
Yes.
you can't say that.
Yeah, but let me...
in
Sweden, in Denmark, in
Sweden
all
and
the
Denmark.
countries
Yeah,
have
but
problems.
Sweden and
in the
Denmark.
Netherlands, they have problems. In all European countries, they have
that
problems
are being
with
built by
immigration.
politicians.
Sweden-
Because look at the rate of immigration in those countries. It is very low. It is very low. But people point at some people, even when there are not massive economic problems. And I will agree with
And
what
they have policy welcoming there. Where is our policy welcoming?
Really? So there's no, I mean, so they come to France and they're not being welcomed at all?
No, well,
No.
that's not the way.
This is what actually, why,
Not
this is what I
related,
think.
no, I'm afraid not.
Well,
But I mean,
I thought the socialists
Europe-
have been in power for 2.5 years.
if I can say-
I may have been wrong.
If I can say that something about the European Union, I mean, the European Union has a responsibility in the way that it actually leaves people dying at its borders today. And it is wrong to say that that you can go through to Europe really freely, because it's not true. You have a lot of people dying at our borders, and it is a massive humanitarian issue that we need to deal
And
with.
this, Nasir Aghanif, is something that the EU has not dealt with well. The question of how it absorbs Europe-wide humanitarian immigration, particularly, which is what you're referring to, how Italy can not shoulder the burden single-handedly of people arriving on its shores. The EU has, in this regard, failed to deal in a humanitarian way with what is a growing humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, they have. Europe, on the whole, has chosen the security of the insiders, despite the security of the outsiders, and to the extent that it would allow a death toll that is really high now, as you just said, because this is the price to pay for the Europeans to remain quiet and securitized in their own country. So there is something quite puzzling about this decision, that we should secure our frontiers and our borders at any price. And the cost is a human cost that we are paying. We are responsible for that. And this is a very controversial issue. That is to say that, are we ready to pay this price for this delusion that we are under threat, that we are losing jobs, that we are losing our wealth? I think there is this kind of very unsettled way of dealing with that, which is these people who die at our borders are not a threat for Europe. Stop saying that, and I'm sure that we can move forward to really fair and politics and policies that might be more useful for the Europeans.
One of the results of the fact that the European Union hasn't found a coordinated policy that allows it to deal with this question, whichever side of the fence you stand on with regard to amounts of immigration that are allowed in, the fact that it hasn't coordinated its policy cleverly. One of the results is that the very basis on which the EU was agreed, that is the free movement of people between its borders, is now being brought into question by countries like Britain. This is disastrous, is it not?
For who?
For the European Union.
The European Union. Well, it's fair to say that it has been a failure. It was philosophically an interesting idea. It was very generous. But once millions of people are coming from all parts of the world, unfortunately, it cannot be fulfilled. It's a promise that can't be fulfilled, unfortunately. And if you're seeing and looking at Europe as a country, it's not a country, but it's a union of countries, it needs a border. I mean, if you don't protect your border, then you're not a country. You're absolutely nothing. You're an empty space.
No, you can be a country in many different ways.
No, I mean,
there are many different
different
ways. We have to invent a way to be a country without having people dying at your borders.
Yeah. And you're also
I mean,
saying
this
that
we can invent, and
we actually,
can
it's
be
not the
inventive
European Union who
about
kills
that.
those people.
No.
What about the smugglers?
They let
about
them
these
die.
countries?
They let them die.
They don't really let them die.
We
I mean,
let them die.
They
Yes,
take chances,
do.
and unfortunately they die.
Yes,
but
we
you can't
do.
say that the US actually
we
let
them
people die in Mexico or in Cuba when people
exactly,
actually
that's the
come
same.
in.
At the US-Mexican border, it's the same. They let die people.
So the solution is...
So the solution is to open the borders and let people in just without any checks.
You know that you are being too extreme, and you don't let any space for any kind of discussion that would be pragmatic.
It is pragmatic. Most of the time when they reach the shores of the European Union, they're welcome, they're treated,
You're being ideological,
You know that. I mean,
and you are helping the National Front, actually.
Oh, okay,
Maybe we should discuss on different bases.
Maybe I shouldn't talk
One of the main problems that we have in France, especially, is that we don't welcome enough people looking for asylum. Like we are one of the countries that welcomes the least percentage of people looking for asylum. So countries can do more. They can do more, and they don't. And it's a problem. They don't because they basically answer to the people who listen to the National Front, and they don't answer to what their values should be as socialists.
We're going to come back to our debate in just a moment. We're just going to break off quickly to head to Sydney, where a press conference is underway, and we're going to find out more about the assault on the cafe that brought to an end a 16-hour siege earlier today.
They stand beside you tomorrow. I will stand beside you forever. I want to pay tribute to the men and women of the New South Wales Police who saved many, many lives over the past 24 hours. And they have risked their lives in doing so. I also want to pay tribute to all the other emergency workers and authorities who provided vital assistance during these events. My thoughts also remain with those hostages who have been freed. They will be provided every support they need in coming days, weeks and months. We are a peaceful, harmonious society, which is the envy of the world. Today, whilst we grieve, we must go about our usual business. We must work, we must talk to our family, we must talk to our friends. When I say to everyone in New South Wales, today, we must come together like never before. We are stronger together. We will get through this. We will get through this. But the events that we have seen have shaken us, but they do not dampen our resolve. Ask Commissioner Saxon.
Good morning. Thank you, Premier. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to now confirm and leave you in no mistake. We're now dealing with a critical incident. In police terms, that means that there's a detailed, thorough investigation which has already commenced. We need to actually find out what's happened here and what's happened inside that cafe. It's not time to speculate or to develop theories. We're going to work through the facts and we will advise you as soon as we can. At this time, we actually need to think about the hostages. The Premier's already indicated those that are caught up in the ordeal. I can only imagine the terror that they've been through. They're very brave people who, in many cases, were just buying a cup of coffee and they got caught up in this dreadful affair. We should reflect on their courage, the courage that they displayed during the many hours in that room. They had to make decisions, hard decisions, and our heart goes out to them. I'm sure you would agree. We too share the grief of the families and the pain that they've been through, not knowing what was happening to their loved ones and not being able to help them. It's been a distressing time for those families, I'm sure you would agree. To the people of Sydney, this was an isolated incident. It is an isolated incident. Do not let this sort of incident bring about any loss of confidence about working or visiting in our city. It was the act of an individual. This should never destroy or change the way of our life. And as the Premier has indicated, this won't change our lives. This will not change the things that we hold dear in this country. Right now, I ask for members of the community to come together. We're Australians, we support mates, we help friends, and this is exactly what we should be doing at this time. It's not about finding reasons to divide communities, but finding ways to actually heal the wounds, to help everyone grow stronger, because we all want a stronger Australia. I too would like to commend the work of our police. While everyone might now second guess as to what's actually occurred in the last hours, well, they're the ones who had to make the decision. Our police had to actually deal with this incident. It was tough, exacting work, many hours, whether they were on a point or whether they were part of a team that had to make that entry and deal with this situation. I want to point out they have saved lives. They have saved many lives. And to those men and women, all that were involved, we thank you. As your Commissioner, I thank you, but as a community, I'm sure Australia thanks you. Thank you that you're there and prepared to do this. To put your life on the line to keep us safe is a very, very honourable cause, and for that our gratitude goes out to you. I can indicate to you that we have accounted for, at this stage, 17 hostages. That includes the 5 that escaped yesterday and a number that have been caught up with, some with traumatic injuries, some with medical conditions. We have, as you have reported, 2 deceased amongst the hostages and 6 that were uninjured. We also have a lone gunman who has been shot and killed, and we have a male police officer who has been injured as a result of a gunshot wound to the face. I have talked to that officer. He is in good condition. He has certainly been assessed and will be remaining in hospital for some time. Not too long, we hope, but he is well and grateful to be alive, let me assure you. That, ladies and gentlemen, is where I'll hand it over to you for questions.
Commissioner, if I can ask, the decision to make that entry, why was it made at that particular point?
Well, that's a decision that was made by the teams responsible. These are the experts. What we don't do is compete with those that have to make that call. They made the call because they believed that at that time, if they didn't enter, there would have been many more lives lost.
Why is that? Why do you think at that moment what was the critical thing? What had changed the sentiment?
Well, I think that events that were unfolding inside the premises led them to the belief that now was the time to actually deploy, and they did.
What events were happening inside?
Well, at this stage, I understand that there was a number of gunshots that were heard, which caused officers to move straight to what we call an EA, an emergency action plan, and that caused them to enter.
Commissioner, was it the case that the gunman had fallen asleep at any stage and that enabled the hostages that were in there to make that break? And as a consequence, the decision was to come?
I'm certainly not in a position to confirm that. As I said, now's not the time to second-guess or speculate this is a critical incident. We will go through this investigation. We need to get it right. We have talked to the coroner. You must understand the coroner has jurisdiction, and we're going to work with the coroner at this stage. There is much to be done.
Was the gunman on Arran Bail, or was he part of the Arran Bail?
At this stage, I'm not going to go into that right now. We're dealing with this critical incident, our thoughts, and we're particularly turning our minds to looking after these hostages and the families of those that have been caught up in this. And of course, we have 2 that have died as a result of actions inside that cafe, and we're particularly trying to make sure that we're there to comfort those families.
Where are the uninjured hostages and how are they being taken care of at this point?
Can you repeat that, please?
The uninjured hostages,
yes.
The ones that aren't in hospital. Where are they at the moment? How are they being taken
Well, they're part of a hostage reception plan. We're dealing with those. They're part of this investigation. We need to talk to them. They're being looked after in terms of their psychological needs at the moment. We'll then work with them, but at this stage they are being well cared for.
reunited with families?
Family are certainly involved in this process.
I appreciate it's a critical incident, but do you know whether the hostages were killed by the gunman or caught in the crossfire?
Again, as a result of an exchange of gunfire inside that premises, police moved in, and at this stage, as I've indicated, we have a number of people that are injured, and certainly we're working through that as part of the critical incident.
He was obviously well known to police. When was the last contact that police had with him, and was he under surveillance prior to yesterday?
Again, that's part of what will come out once we go further into this, but at this stage we're not going to enter into that. Sorry, excuse me.
Was the escalation of the government's actions inside the building related at all to his name being released by media and by the police?
Look, I've got no advice to that.
Premier, you've been criticised for the Bail Act in the past. There's obviously been reports that this guy was out on bail. Are you concerned that essentially that allowed this terrible thing to happen?
Well, I'm concerned that there was a vicious, horrendous attack that has taken place in the heart of our city. And there are many questions that will come in coming hours, days and weeks. What I can assure you is I will answer every single one of them. We will get to the bottom of events, and we will do everything possible to ensure we do not see happen again in this city what we saw in the last 24 hours.
At this stage, what I can assure you is that that particular premises has been secured, and at this stage we have no explosive devices that have been found.
Can you at least
reveal the treatment that the hostages, felt in the siege? Were they treated well or were they abused? Is there any indication of that?
Well, look at this stage, rather than go into that until...
Welcome back. That was the press conference brought to you live from Sydney, where it is just coming up now to 6 a.m., the end of a long night. More details there emerging about what happened and the numbers of those who died. Armin, George, and you were listening to what they had to say. What's emerged?
Well, it's been confirmed that the hostage taker was killed in this operation. There are also two dead members of the public. Two of the hostages died. A certain number have been injured. In total, there were 17 hostages accounted for. Several of those, of course, managed to escape earlier on in this whole drama. And it has been described as an isolated incident, so that the general sense we're getting is that this was not part of some kind of organised plot so far, although, again, a lot of details have yet to be confirmed because there will be an inquiry into this. It's being treated at the moment as a critical incident by police. They're not using the word terrorist incident.
It all ended just under 4 hours ago now, Armin. Any word from the police on that rather dramatic end that we saw where they went in and stormed the place? Did they talk more about the negotiations?
They were asked a lot about that, and they didn't say very much. The police spokesman merely saying that that the team decided that they had to make that decision at the time when they did, because had they not got in, they believed, or they had reason to believe, that a lot more lives would be lost. But of course, they didn't give details as to exactly what triggered that decision at that point in time.
An inquiry then now underway?
Yes.
More details, no doubt, to come. It is just coming up now to 8 p.m. here in Paris, 6 a.m. in Sydney. We've been covering for you the end of that hostage crisis in Sydney. It was just under 4 hours ago now that police stormed the cafe where the gunman had been holding 17 hostages for 16 hours. That's now been brought to an end. Australian police talking about the latest information. 3 people now known, 2 have died, several others injured. It brings us to the end of tonight's debate, devoted to the question of immigration in the wake of François Hollande's speech in praise of it. Thank you very much to my guests for having been with us this evening. Apologies for the fact that it was rather cut short by events in Australia. From all of us tonight here, though, it's good evening.